Hey guys, tonight I am over at Ponce Inlet. We're going to tour the lighthouse. So come on, let's check it out. Hey, and welcome back to Drawing Closer to God. Tonight I want you to put on your science hat for a minute. Pretend you're back in science class in high school. And we're going to talk a little bit about earth science and the book of Genesis. So, evolutionists and creationists look at the physical evidence that we have around the world from two different viewpoints. And it's very important to understand this. When you approach science from the Bible's perspective, then you're going to start with what the Bible says and look for the evidence and how it fits together with what we see in the Bible. When you start from the evolutionary standpoint, then you're going to be skewed toward this idea that was put forth by Darwin of evolution, that life came into being from chemical processes to a single-celled organism to marine life to land life and more complex life until you get to modern-day man. They would say that we're still evolving and these processes are still going on. But the thing is, it takes millions, even billions of years, according to evolution. The dates in the Bible add up to somewhere around 6,000 to 7,000 years. And an evolutionist would say that it was, I think, 4.5 billion years ago that the universe came into being. I forget exactly. But they involve long periods of time. A little bit of change over long periods of time. So if Adam is in your past, that means that God created the universe, God created me and you, and God is the authority. If he can create it, he can control it, and he sets the rules. And there are going to be certain rules. He's going to have his truth and his morality that he puts forth. But if an ape is in your past, or some ape-like creature that we've evolved from, then that means there are no rules, that we're just a cosmic accident, that there's no absolute truth. Morality is relative. It's every person does what they think is right in their own eyes. And there are no rules. Now, a person from a Christian perspective would look at the world from a biblical worldview. And we see from the scriptures that there was the creation. God created everything in the universe in 6 days. And then there was corruption. Adam and Eve sinned, and so sin entered into creation and corrupted things. Man died, and our bodies decay and wear out. After sin, you see things like thistles and thorns and pestilences that come on the scene that were not there before. This is part of the curse even on the creation. And the Bible says that all of creation groans and waits really for that day when Christ's return comes and things are put back to Adam and Eve, to Garden of Eden conditions. Then there was the catastrophe, the great flood of Noah's time. And God destroyed the surface of the earth with water. And then there was the confusion of tongues after the flood. There was one spoken language in the entire world. And God comes down and confuses the languages and spreads these people out into various parts of the earth. You have different cultures form around different language groups around the world. Then you have Christ coming. And Christ is God's answer to our sin. He is the perfect man, and he is God. He is God in human form. He does great miracles. He preaches great sermons. But the primary reason for him to come was to die on the cross. So through his death, burial, and resurrection on the cross, we have salvation secured for us. We have forgiveness of sin and a restoration of our relationship to God. And then the consummation is the second coming of Christ, and Christ setting up his eternal kingdom, and us being part of that adopted family into God's family again. From an evolutionary standpoint, you're looking at death, bloodshed, suffering, disease, all of these processes of survival and millions of years producing man's existence today. So let's start with the Great Flood. The Great Flood of Noah, because we can find evidence all over the world of this great event, this catastrophic event. So let's take a look at it. Now, in earth science in most universities, you're going to talk about the geologic column at some point. And it's the idea that fossils that are in the lowest layer are the most ancient. And then as you go up in layers, you get to more modern species. And you do see this column, all around the world. And there are so many fossils, and we're discovering more every day. But fossils are rare things. I mean, it takes special circumstances for fossils to form. Normally, let's take this example of a fish. When a fish dies, it just sort of bobs upside down in the water. Other fish come and feed on it, and there's very little remaining to even be buried and form a fossil. A fossil is formed over time as the living material, the organic material, is replaced by mineral material of water with minerals in it flowing into those cavities and filling it up. And over time, the living tissue is replaced with rock or mineral, and it hardens and is preserved. Here's an example. Take a look at this. A fish that sees lunch, right? I'm going to eat that lunch, and so he does, and here comes these tons of sediment down on top of it. This fish doesn't even have time to eat its lunch before it becomes flattened under all of this weight. That's a cartoon, but take a look at this. This is the actual fossil that was discovered, and it's a fish in the process of eating another fish. That's not going to happen over millions of years or even days or hours. It's got to be instantaneous to be preserved in this way. Here's another one. This is an ichthyosaur, a marine reptile. It's actually giving birth to a baby here. And again, that's got to be instantaneous to be preserved like that in the same layer. Here is a jellyfish. And you've probably handled a jellyfish. It'll just sort of seep through your fingers and fall apart many times. Or if you put it out in the sun, it's going to shrivel up in a matter of hours. But this is perfectly preserved. And it can only happen if it's rapidly, instantaneously covered in sediments. Here's another one. These are sea lilies. Look at how intricate and detailed these are. I mean, this looks like a carving, but it's an actual fossil of these sea lilies. And you know how fragile seaweed is, and even flowers. You put them out in the sun, they wither and they shrink in just a matter of hours. Here's a wasp. Look at the detail in these wings. This had to be buried instantaneously for the details to be preserved like this. Here's a flower. It looks like a perfectly pressed flower. The petals are in full bloom. It looks great. It looks like a pressed flower that you would give as a gift to someone. So, what's the point of all this? Through the flood, there would have been sediments flowing down from mountains and other areas that would have formed this heavy sludge and sediment that would have covered things in layers. If you've ever made mud pies and you had a glass jar and you put the dirt in it with the water and you shake it up and you set it down, after a period of time, that sediment's going to settle in very specific layers, and you can see the layers even in a little glass jar. And what we see all over the world are these layers, and there are some that span continents. You can see the same layers in the same order in Europe that you see in America. So it's pretty amazing, and it works consistently with the idea of Noah's flood. A global flood that covered the earth in these different layers of sediments. Here's another one. These polystrate trees are all over the world. You find them on every continent. These are tree trunks that have petrified, and they're going straight up through multiple layers that are supposedly, millions of years old, right? But these layers have this tree going straight up through them. How is that possible? If a tree dies or gets knocked over, it's going to lay flat. And really, most trees are going to be eaten up by fungus and termites before they ever have a chance to be buried. So this tree would have had to have been buried rapidly by these layers of soil and sediment. And actually, if a tree is knocked over in water, it's going to turn sideways and float. But these are straight up. Some are upside down, but it was probably a thick mud that surrounded them. And so we have these all over. Look at this: United States, Canada, Germany. They've been found in Australia. Literally all over the earth, these types of petrified tree trunks going up through multiple layers of sediment. This is a trunk from the petrified forest in Arizona. When I was 8 years old, my parents took us on a trip out west, and one of the places we visit was the petrified forest. And if you look at this, it's gorgeous. So over time, those living organic parts of that tree were replaced by minerals of water flowing through this. And look at the minerals that it left. It's just gorgeous. They had slices of these that have been highly polished. They made coffee tables out of them. They were beautiful. Let's talk about Mount Everest for a second. Mount Everest, the tallest peak in the world, in the Himalayas. I had to Google it. It's 29,000 plus feet tall. Then I had to know what's the average cruising height and altitude of a commercial airliner, and it's 38,000 feet. And then I asked, what's the elevation of DeLand, Florida? And it's 56 feet. So we really have no concept of the scale here. It's just massive. And yet, look at what you find on the top of Mount Everest. Marine fossils. These are fish fossils that have been found in the rock layers on top of Mount Everest. How could that be? Well, I believe that about 4,400 years ago, God flooded the earth, and it covered every surface of the earth, even the tallest mountains. Now, a secular scientist would say, well, this used to be a seabed, and it got raised up over time through, different processes. But to me, this is really good evidence of a global, worldwide flood. Back in the 1990s, there was a scientist who had a T-Rex bone and cut it open, put some of the material on a slide and put it under her microscope. What she discovered was soft tissue. There were red blood cells, there were bone cells that were still intact. These had not been replaced by minerals and turned to stone. This was actual tissue, organic tissue. And look at what she says. She says, now this specimen actually looks like it had come from an animal that looks like it died 200 or 300 years ago. But she concludes with, And I know very well that they died much longer than that. That's those secular scientist viewpoints coming through again. It cannot be a few hundred years. It has to be millions of years, right? And so this kind of sent a shock through the scientific community. I mean, God created dinosaurs. They would have been there from day 6 of creation, the land animals. The Bible mentions Behemoth and Leviathan. These, when he describes Behemoth, he says it has a long tail like a cedar tree. And some Bible translations have tried to say this was an elephant or a hippo. But if you've ever seen an elephant or hippo tail, they're just tiny little things. This said it had a tail like a cedar tree, which sounds more like a sauropod dinosaur. And even Marco Polo gives eyewitness accounts of being in China back in the 1400s and seeing these 6-foot tall dragon-like creatures that were pulling a cart in China. So probably over time, man killed out a lot of the dinosaurs because they were a threat to their villages or communities or whatever. If a Tyrannosaurus was threatening, then you would have to go hunt it down and kill it. And you say, well, how did they get T-Rexes on the ark? Well, they wouldn't have had to take an adult one. You wouldn't want to take a grandpa T-Rex. You'd want to take a young teenage T-Rex, and then they could reproduce once they got off the ark. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about this. Now, this has been in I remember seeing this in textbooks when I was a kid. This was touted as a fossil of an ancient form of fish. This was like an ancestor to modern fish. And it was shown in textbook after textbook that I remember in my science classes. Well, in the 1990s, they found out it's actually not extinct. It's still alive today. They found it in the Indian Ocean. And it's not an ancestor to modern fish. But anyway, they still say that. This is the Grand Canyon, and on that same trip where I went to the Petrified Forest, we also went to the Grand Canyon, and I can remember as an 8-year-old boy going up to the rim, the edge of the canyon, and it literally taking my breath away, a mile deep. And of course the question here is, did this take a lot of time and a little bit of water to carve the canyon, or was it a lot of water and a little bit of time? Now, we know from the book of Genesis that not only did rain come down from the sky, but the fountains of the great deep, there was water coming up out of the crust of the earth. Now, this is just my theory and my idea, but when you look at a globe and a map of the Earth's surface, in the middle of most of the oceans of the Earth, there are these mid-oceanic ridges, and they're sort of they come up and then they spread out over the ocean bed. And it's my theory that that's maybe where these fountains of the deep broke open and water come gushing out at almost supersonic speeds. I mean, and it would cause rainfall, just torrential rain. And this would slowly build up. You know, people say, well, where did the water from the flood go? And I'd say, well, it's still here. Earth is 70% covered in water. And we have a lot of water on the polar ice caps that is built up. And we know that as that water melts, if it were to melt completely, it would raise the level of the oceans globally around the world. Mount St. Helens, 1980. Mount St. Helens erupted. And so take a look at this. This is Mount St. Helens on the left before the eruption and on the right after the eruption. It literally blew its top off. And what resulted was a mixture of ash and mud and some water that came rushing down from the mountain slopes. And it created a mini Grand Canyon in a matter of 6 weeks. Take a look at this picture. This woman is standing at the bottom of a canyon, 50 feet tall, and there you can see the stratified layers in this. These layers were laid down in just a matter of weeks. And here's a picture of the Badlands National Park. What's interesting, this is near Mount Rushmore in South Dakota, but you can see the plains back there in the background, and you have these flat plains, and then suddenly there's this massive network of water drainage and water drop-off. It's the same features when you have massive water flow through soft sediment. And so you have these canyon-like features that look like the Grand Canyon. You have Bryce Canyon, the Grand Canyon, Badlands. A lot of these features in the western United States. You have some features like this in other areas of the world. So as the floodwaters would have receded at the time of Noah, a lot of water would have collected in certain areas and formed these gigantic lakes. And when some part of that breaks, you're going to have a massive flow of water. And so we believe that that's probably what formed the Badlands, the Grand Canyon, and other things. You would think that if there was this massive flow of water that formed these canyons, at some point there would be a buildup of the sediment somewhere down the line. And when you go to the Grand Canyon, you find exactly that. After you get through the canyon, there's this buildup of this mound of sediment that the water had pushed through the canyon. So Grand Canyon was very likely formed in just a matter of a few weeks. Here's the entrance to Carlsbad Caverns. Back from 1924 to 1988, the sign on the entrance said, at least 260 million years old. In 1988, they said 7 to 10 million years old. In 1990, they changed it to 2 million years old. And by 1993, the sign was gone. When you go and you look at these cave formations, look at this. Jerry Trout, a cave specialist with the Forest Service, says that through photo monitoring, he has watched a stalactite, the little feature that comes down from the ceiling. He's watched them grow several inches in a matter of a few days. You can go to the Statue of Liberty, and underneath the Statue of Liberty, you'll find stalactites hanging down that are 6 feet long. And how long have we had the Statue of Liberty? So these cave formations can form rapidly. It does not take millions of years. And finally, here is another example of proof that it doesn't take millions of years for Earth to produce the features that we see in it. Look at this picture. Can you tell the difference between a natural diamond and a lab-grown diamond? These are two photos side by side. The one on the left is found deep in the ground under immense pressure and heat. Carbon forms a diamond, which is the hardest known substance. And in a lab, they can actually form these diamonds in just a few hours. And they sell them. They have the same properties as regular diamonds. There's a few little differences because of the process is a little bit different, but it's just amazing. This is further proof that it doesn't take millions of years for diamonds to form. It can be done in a very short time. So, listen, I want you to be equipped as a believer that we don't have to listen to secular science, because really there is observable science where you do an experiment, you get a result, you try it again, you get the same result. Somebody else takes your experiment, they try it, and they get the same result. That's called observable science, and that is good science. When you get into the idea of evolution, that's really outside of the realm of observable science, and really starts to become almost a religion unto itself, because it takes faith to believe in evolution, just like it takes faith to believe in creation. So I know you're concerned about your children, grandchildren that are going to universities and their heads are being filled with all of this propaganda. about evolution, but we can fully rely on God's Word to be the absolute rock-solid truth. And I do believe that science will ultimately prove the Bible to be absolutely true. And we see more and more evidence all the time. And the amount of evidence that has come in the last century is just staggering. It's really amazing. All right, well, that's just a little bit, and I just wanted to give you a taste of that. There's a lot of other resources out there you can study about defending the faith and defending the Bible against scientific claims and so forth. All right, so hope you enjoyed that, and I'll leave you with another drawing, and we'll see you next time on Drawing Closer to God. Thanks.